And this is part of my second book. It's called Truth Be Told About Addiction. My Life, Anthony Veiga. Introduction. I had to figure out if I wanted to live or die. You see, with me, I was doing the wrong thing for so long, it felt right. I was raised by two loving parents. It wasn't the way they raised me, it was the choices I made, period. The problem wasn't the drugs or alcohol, it was me. I had to take a long, hard look at myself, probably the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. But it was the only way for me to get and stay clean. Now, I wrote this book in a rhyme, so it's a little different. So my first chapter is titled In a Vault. Something happened to me when I was just a child that set me on a path of being self-destructive and very wild. My emotions in a normal way could not be built, for I was carrying around all this false shame and guilt. When someone takes away your innocence and does not care, it is a heavy burden that all of us victims must share. I need to tell my story and get it out, because if I don't, my recovery will be in jeopardy, there is no doubt. I asked God, why did this happen to me? But I was so closed-minded, I couldn't see. I blamed him, not the person at fault. So for years, I locked all my feelings in a vault. I built walls so very strong and tall that I knew in my heart they would never fall. Next part. Trying to forget. When I was 11, I had my first drink. It made me feel wonderful and I didn't have to think. The more I drank, the better I felt. Then I found marijuana and I loved the way it smelled. I would smoke it day and night. After a while, I didn't care if it was wrong or right. I loved the way I felt when I was drinking and drugging. I didn't care about all that kissing and hugging. Every day I would try to forget. But no matter how much I drank, that wasn't happening yet. I became a teenager and started taking pills. Just the thought of getting them would give me the chills. What I forgot to mention is that I had already been arrested twice. I would never listen to anybody, especially my parents' advice. One day I ate a handful of pills thinking I was cool and wound up in the nurse's office of my junior high school. She asked what's the matter and I said I think it's something I ate. She told me to lie down because for my next class I was already late. I wound up sleeping it off and being okay. That didn't stop me. I got high the very next day. The roll of the dice. When I was a teenager, I loved to work on cars. But 7 nights a week, I would be in the local bars. My dream was to be a mechanic and have my own place. The problem was these thoughts in my head were taking up too much space. At this age, I knew I didn't do anything wrong, so I tried to grin and bear it and just be strong. The problem was I had all this anger inside, and when it was unleashed, I had nowhere to hide. I would go from being totally mellow to complete rage. With my anger problem, there was no gauge. The walls got thicker because of being scarred, so the only thing I could do was become very hard. For all my close friends, I always had good advice. But with me, my emotions were like the roll of the dice. The Weekend Warrior. 13 years after the incident, I graduated high school. I would wear my leather and try to be cool. Through high school, I got in some fights. What happened to me would still keep me up nights. After high school, I thought I found what I was looking for. You see, a friend turned me on. It was heroin I would score. Heroin made me feel like I finally found me, not realizing I was in for a life full of misery. I started off doing it once a week. Not a word of this to anyone I would speak. You see, I really loved the way it made me feel. And I figured only once a week was not a big deal. I was a weekend warrior for quite a while. Nobody ever knew, and that would make me smile. I would sell drugs and even a gun. So I could get my heroin on the weekend and have some fun. After a while, my use of heroin turned into a habit. Every opportunity to get high, I would grab it. The more I got high, the less I had to deal with reality. I was drifting further and further from my spirituality. Passing by. The years flew by and my habit grew and grew. Heroin and I became stuck together like glue. This addiction was not in the least bit funny. I was working 2 jobs and it was taking all my money. It seemed the more I did, the more I needed. I wasn't paying attention to my girlfriend and she finally cheated. That's all I needed was another excuse. Now here I am, back to being single and on the loose. It was getting bad, so I decided to go into a detox. I wasn't ready to get clean, so all I did was watch the clocks. When my time was up, I said goodbye, and I drove down the street to get high. I remember I took some Benadryl before walking out the door. Next thing I know, I'm waking up on the car floor. It was like 4 or 5 hours later. My body felt like it got run over by a freighter. All that time, people passing by. Nobody said a word. I guess they knew I was high. No doubt. I always loved the song by U2 called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was outside myself that I was looking for more. I was so lost in drugs and that whole lifestyle that I didn't find myself for a very long while. I never told anyone I was molested until I was 38. If you have been there, don't be like me. Speak up before it's too late. I could not begin to heal until the words came out. It was like a ton of weight was lifted off me, there is no doubt. I remember feeling anxious and frustrated, but it was time for me to stop being sedated. The counselor listened as I spoke of what happened to me. He said, you need to tell your story if you truly want to be free. So I started to tell my story a little at a time. It's strange, but I felt comfortable doing it in a rhyme. The more I wrote, the better I began to feel. He was right. This was the only way I could truly start to heal. Risen. I finished my time in rehab and moved into a sober house. I would go to meetings every day. My thoughts of getting high, they would douse. After being clean and sober for 11 months, I had to go to prison. I was okay with that because the spirit in me was risen. I went in with my head held high and stayed out of trouble. As I look back, I realized my faith and hope were double. I was locked up for almost 2 years. 9 days before I got out, I shed many tears. You see, on that 9th day, I had to make a choice. The officer came to me and said there was a call from your sister Joyce. My father was in the hospital, not going to make it through the night. I finally got transported to see him and say, I love you, and everything is all right. I got to see him for 1 hour at the end of his life. Every time I think about it, it cuts like a knife. I was back at the prison for about 2 hours when I got the call. I went to the chaplain's office and started to bawl. You see, I should have been out, but my paperwork was lost. Because of this reason, I had to pay this tremendous cost. I've had an anger problem all my life. It took everything I had not to lose it. On my freedom and sobriety, I would not quit. Quality of life. I got out of prison on a Saturday and went to see my mom. My nephew took me to see Leonard Skinner that night, and I was extremely calm. All these people having a great time and feeling good, all this reality hit me right where I stood. I was out for 48 days when my mom passed away. She stopped her dialysis because in this life, she did not want to stay. She said she had no quality of life anymore. I understood her, even though my heart hit the floor. Both my mom and dad died 57 days apart. This put a huge hole right through my heart. 17 months later, my cousin Vinny passed away. I didn't think I could make it through another day. In 19 short months, I lost the 3 closest people in my life. 2.5 years later, I met my ex-wife. Empty plate. I thought I met my soulmate, the woman of my dreams. Divorced after 8.5 years. I was wrong, it seems. It started off good and went bad after a while. Thought I could fix it. Boy, was I in denial. I know I wasn't the best husband, but I did the best I could. When my best wasn't good enough, I walked away for good. I was hoping she would change and show me more love. Every night I would pray to God up above. When we first met, we talked all day and all night. It's like we didn't want to be out of each other's sight. I was 45 and she was 41. We would talk and laugh and had so much fun. It's a terrible thing when the person you thought was your soulmate winds up making your heart feel like an empty plate. I finally came to realize that this was never going to change. Again, it was my life I had to rearrange. No clue. So here I am, divorced at 54. No worries, I knew God would open another door. I left with only a bag of clothes. Where I was going, God knows. I remember standing in front of the judge. I was so empty, I couldn't even hold a grudge. I called my nephew and he took me in. It was this new life I had to begin. Even though at times I felt like life was unfair and cold. One day at a time, I was told. Taking life day by day makes you look at things in a different way. I left the courthouse not knowing what I was going to do. As far as the rest of my life, I didn't have a clue. God's plan. I stayed with my nephew and worked out of state. It would be a very long while before I would date. After a while, I started to date someone. She went back with her ex, and we were done. I had been through a lot and just wanted to feel. I guess in this particular case, it wasn't real. I said to myself, the next relationship that comes my way, I'm going to take my time because I want it to stay. So I buried myself in work and didn't look back. I found out that for making people smile and laugh, I had a real knack. I always try to help others as much as I can. I figure if I listen real hard, that this is God's plan. When I help people, it makes me feel better. When the next woman wants to get close to me, I'll let her. I can't let myself become bitter and hard, even though many times my heart has been scarred. I know not feeling is the worst thing in life. I had gotten that way from my ex-wife. Particular mold. I'm working hard and trying to get through the day and make it to the end of the week to get my pay. I was working too much and only existing. I wanted to feel again, but kept resisting. You know, I kept putting one foot in front of the other. I realized it was my feelings I was trying to smother. My nephew and I tried to start something on the side, but it was my record I could not hide. It started off slow but going well, when all of a sudden everything went to hell. Home advisor kicked us off because of me. It was my record that was the key. They found out all about my past, and to this particular mold I was cast. I tried to explain that I had 15 years clean, but the person I spoke to was very mean. It was our business we were trying to rescue, but they didn't care about me or my nephew. Living proof. Here I am, no job and arthritis setting in, finding it very hard to walk, another hit to the chin. I remember needing to get a cane to walk up the stairs. The pain to my eyes would bring tears. Went to the doctors to see if they had some kind of shot. Would I be disabled? My stomach was in a knot. I went to a rheumatologist to see what was wrong. He said, you have arthritis, so you have to be strong. I said, doctor, I do roofing for a living. He said, this disease can be very, very unforgiving. Let's try Humira and see how it works. That's not a narcotic, doc, because I don't want any perks. No, it's not a narcotic, he said. Well, I hope it works, cause I can barely get out of bed. I think this will work, but it's going to take a little time. I pray to God, doc, because it's ladders I need to climb. Within a couple of months, I was back on the roof. Miracles can happen. I'm living proof. Saved. The medicine started to work. I was getting stronger. I kept trying until I was able to walk longer. Every day I would push myself to do more, up and down the